to learn a little bit about John's life. And we had learned that John was born in Indiana on December 30th, 1958. He had a dream of moving to California, and he picked up his things and drove here with just his car at age 18 with the life and the dream of starting a life in California. He met his wife, Karen, at work, and he went on to work for Diebold, where his wife and him have been married now for 14 years. They both said, Rachel and his mom both said, a quality of John was that he liked to encourage people. He liked to just tell people, you can do it. He just seemed like it was such an encouragement in his life. He also liked to make people laugh constantly in different ways. That was just part of his makeup. A couple things that he was passionate about that we learned in that meeting, that he liked to cook. He was passionate about cooking. Especially, it seemed like around Thanksgiving was a time of joy for him, preparing the Thanksgiving, the dinner and the turkey, and just having everyone come together and enjoying what he's put together, that friendship and that socializing time. He was also passionate about writing. One of the things that he liked to do was to write. He often talked about, it sounded like he talked about writing a book with all these things that he put together. The good thing about being passionate about writing is often the things that you leave behind, those memories and those writings for your loved ones. We're going to hear one of those today from one of his family members that's going to share one of those poems with us. One other thing that we can learn from each other is just a time of sharing. And we've asked a few people today to come up that were a part of his life to share a few moments of what that meant in their life. And I'll bring them up one by one so they can share. And then after that, we have a little slideshow we put together as family of just the life of John. So if you would, I'm going to ask Anthony, John's son, to come up and share a few things with us.
All I can say is he was my dad, and he rescued my mom and my sister from Simi Valley. He put us in a house in Mission Viejo like he promised us. He promised us a house and a dog, and he gave us all that. And one day my mom was listening to the radio and heard there was this acting call. I went, and turns out things were going good. I got an agent, I started doing things, and it was time to pick my acting name. And my real last name is Smith, but I chose Medwetz because he was my dad, and I felt like he was my dad. I felt like he was my blood dad, and Medwetz is what I took. And he's taught me and my family so much about living and going after what you destined, and he never gave up. He always just kept going. I never ever heard him raise his voice at my mom. I don't know how he put up with all my stuff. I mean, he was just always there loving us, and always there to be there for us, always there giving good advice, always spoiling my mom, always giving her gifts, and he'd give me gifts, and he'd tell me, don't tell her I gave it to you. Say that you bought it for her. It'll make her feel better. And Valentine's Day and everything, and I learned that with my dad, that's the man that I want to be to my wife one day, and that's the dad that I want to be to my son one day. And he's taught us everything. And I wrote a song for him, and I'd like to first have it be recognized that my good friend Jay helped me a lot on this. He actually made the beat, and I want to also have Christine recognized, who helped sing one of the choruses. And it's one of those situations where friends just come out of nowhere that you never thought were friends before, in situations that you need the most support and love. And I just am so thankful for Jay and my girlfriend Dion, who's been there for me, and I just am so thankful that I do have support with all this. It's made things a lot easier. So when you hear this song, it should get you to understand what he's meant to me and what I plan to do with this situation. So if you could please start the it's got a little rap in it, just to let you know. I don't know how to sing, so. Here we are, dealing with what we got. I stand here before you with a heart that's shot.
My daddy's up there looking down the song. We can take a moment with my music for a conference call. Oh, daddy, we might have cried and screamed, but don't let it scare you. Come to us with your wings. This song's for you. I know you like to imagine, but we never imagined that this day would happen so soon, and it hit us like a typhoon. I thought my arms about to pop like balloons, but don't worry, this ain't a sad song to sing. It's all about the memories that I'm about to bring. Remember that time in kindergarten, after graduation, the one I tried to star in. Superstar putting a ride on my shirt, holding me in your arms, showing me how a dad works. Remember daddy singing first grade you had to make. Felt so proud as he made the raisin shakes. First time I had a dad in class that had the best daddy there is. Anyone can do the math. I missed the times without television marathons, watching X-Files in the bed with no lights on. Remember the time you took me on my first golfing trip? I couldn't get that first hole, every hit was a miss. Oh daddy, I need you back now. You didn't even give me a chance to make you proud. I had an obligation being your son until you enter our hearts. My sunshine is done. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And if it takes a dream to be there, I will dream to be your son again. When nights hits, it's the hardest part. I want family days like we had back in Moore Park. Arnie Mortons of Chicago in the limousine. I want the good times, not the moment of the suffering. Oh daddy, can you feel me inside? Forgive me for the fight we had. How you apologize? I know I wasn't the best I could have been, but I never gave up. With your love I kept continuing. Our memories will keep me going in life. Let me bring back a few so I can be precise. You gave me for support in my career. When it came down to it, I chose you for my premiere. Cameras flashing, standing right beside my pops. If I'm more proud to be your son in the movie they watch. Oh dad, we're gonna miss your funny jokes here, and gosh darn it, Anthony's the one I'll miss the most. I realize now your father's ship I took for granted. Now I'm here without a daddy in this world stranded. If you could visit me in every gym, having the hardest time without you like you wouldn't believe. Oh dad, our family's a mess. I thought I knew pain, but this is far beyond the breast. Right now I could really use your help, be my guardian angel. I can't do it by myself. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And if it takes a dream to be there, I will dream to be your son again. Dad, I know the way you want it. I felt before, but I have a responsibility now. Your wife, my mother, be well taken care of. I promise. Even though this hurts, I know you know my strength. You showed me how to be a man, for that I said thanks. Your crying wife, my crying mother, I'm gonna spoil her right, and I'll even be a nice brother. It's about that time, it's my turn to steer the ship. You taught me all I need to know, and now I'll make it obvious. I'll build a family, make you proud upstairs. I'll name my son after you to show you how much I care. Without you, I wouldn't be standing in place. I'm gonna be something with you, I have all the faith. I've got one more request, it's only one more thing. When I'm asleep at night, visit me in all my dreams. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And if it takes a dream to be there, I will dream to be your son again. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I am not the only one. And if it takes a dream to be there, I will dream to be your son again.
That was great. I could see that his writing has even gotten down to his children as well. That was awesome. I'd like to bring up now Steve, which is John's brother.
You know, as you heard, John was born on December 30th, 1958, and I was 2. In case you haven't noticed, I'm his twin brother. I can confidently say that no one knew him longer. You know, he liked joking about being my older brother, you know, every time we talked. Over the years, you know, we both knew it was 6 minutes, but he'd always say it was 6 minutes, and every time it came up, I purposely would change it and say, no, it was 3 minutes. He'd go, no, I think it was 6 minutes. And the next time I'd say, I think it was 8 minutes. And I'm not sure if he always played on it with me, or you know, was playing with me, or thought that I really forgot each time, but it was one of the things that kind of went back and forth between us. I think when I think about the traits of being John's twin brother, I always think one of the aspects, or the trait that I always thought we shared the most, was our voice. And so if you talk to either one of us on the phone, when the other side of the phone picked up, there was always that little delay. You know, I think even when I called Karen when John was still alive, and John, Steve, and John during high school years took full advantage of that possibility. I met my wife in high school. John was friends with both. John was my brother and friends with Laura, and it was very typical when John would call to talk. When Laura would call to talk to me, if John picked up the phone, well, she didn't know who she was talking to. We even thought about making a code system, so if it was me, I'd say sunshine or something like that, so John couldn't, you know, fake her out. I really thought I always kind of panicked that one day I'd pick up Laura and she'd be telling me it was so nice of you to propose the evening before. You know, I think it's obvious if you knew John, his level of motivation and passion was, you know, like unbelievable. You might even say maybe he was a bit of an entertainer. You know, I think, you know, if he could have done it, he would have been a movie star or an entertainer. He would have got, you know, in front of crowds like that. But I think what he did is he was always going, what I call it, to that next passionate moment in life. Anything you did with John, you know, whether it was went to a movie, you went to dinner, you read a book, it seemed like whatever you did to him, it was a passionate thing. And I'm not talking about, obviously, like jumping out of airplanes, paratrooping, things like that, flying, but just everything he did, you know, was just at that next higher level. I remember one of the first times I came out here and met him, we went out for breakfast. It was after Karen and John were married. And we went out, actually we were at his house, and we decided we were going to go out for breakfast. And on the way for breakfast, we stopped, and he buys me one of these like little green shot glasses of alfalfa or something that they sell at the health food stuff. So we stopped, and we had one of those. And then he says, well, we have to, this coffee place is out of this world. We got to go there and get a cup of coffee. And so we went there, and halfway through the coffee, he said, okay, now I got to take you to this bagel shop. They got the best bagels in town. You know, and we had, you know, like I think 2 hours later we came back after we picked up a cup of coffee, and we've been to 3 or 4 different places. And I'm thinking, God, you know, he went up to take a shower, and I remember I was sitting at the table with Karen, and we were kind of talking. And I said, God, it sure is nice of John to do this for me, to like take me out and entertain me, show me all these things. And she said, welcome to our lives. This is how it is living with John. You know, I hate to, you know, I wish I said I had a great quote up here for a while to talk about, you know, it was from the Bible or a great philosopher, but the other day I was listening to a movie, watching a movie, a newer movie, and it was called Hitch, and the character says this, and I actually thought of John. And what it says is, in life, it's not the number of breaths you take, it's the number of moments you take your breath away. And I think that's kind of how John lived his life. He wanted to always take his breath away or someone else's breath away. He wasn't as concerned with how many breaths he took. You know, one time we talked about other things we might do if we weren't doing, what we were doing professionally, and he said he had always hoped to become a motivational speaker. And I'll never forget saying, John, you are a motivational speaker. You know, in our younger days, you know, we shared a bedroom. We actually shared a bedroom all the way through high school. And, you know, we had our moments, but I don't remember any big tantrums between us. We, you know, for the most part, you know, we always got along. But I'll never forget, every night we would talk a lot. Not every night, but we would talk a lot. One of us would just say to the other one, let's talk. And just in bed with the lights off, laying in bed, we would just talk back and forth. You know, we talked about teachers, we talked about girls, of course, as we got older. I don't want to panic my mom, but I probably learned more from John about the birds and bees talking tonight than anybody. I remember once, I don't know if you realize this, we actually had this encyclopedia. It was a health encyclopedia in the house, and it was really meant for, like, if your kid has a high fever, you know, those kind of things. And he said, you know, Steve, there's a whole chapter about sex in that thing. You gotta read it. You know, I think that sitting in bed and talking, you know, I like to think it helped both of us a lot. But the things we would talk about, we talk about people we were having problems with at school. We would talk about neighbor, whatever, and it seemed like after we were done talking, we learned how to deal with those situations in life. And I think I just learned so much from my brother just by sitting and, you know, just sleeping in the same bedroom and talking to him and doing this let's talk night after night. I have to mention John's sense of humor. I think you've heard a little bit about that. You know, we both grew up in a tavern. I think some of that came out of that life, maybe. No, but I read an article a while back ago about humor, and what the person said was, you know, some people are funny because they tell jokes. Some people tell funny stories. Some people have props. Some people are satire. They make fun of other things. And I think John had it all. I mean, I can't think. If you ask me the one part of his sense of humor that he had or made his sense of humor, I can't think of one thing. It was all these different things. You know, I think you know, one of his favorite types of jokes. You know, when I first started having kids, I mean, he liked the young kids' jokes too. It wasn't just like adult jokes or political jokes. And I think when my kids were younger, I think I got like the majority of my knock-knock jokes from talking to John on the phone. And this joke, he must have told me this joke 10 times, and I'm going to share it to you because when I still use this joke. And you know, I always look for young kids. Hey, and it's an Easter joke, and don't worry, it's appropriate for a church. But it's he would say, knock knock, who's there? Ether. Ether who? Ether bunny. And then the second part, and you go, knock knock, who's there? Cargo. Cargo who? Cargo beep beep, run over Ether bunny. and then he'd say, John, don't worry, the Ether bunny will be back next year. So it's, you know, they say, you know, going back to this comedian thing, they say some people enjoy telling the story, some people like hearing the laughter. I think John liked it all. He had it all and liked it all. You know, when we would talk sometimes, you know, one of the things I think John was so great at is just finding the great things in other people. We would talk about other people, and I mean, he would walk through a casino in Vegas and just make friends with people, you know. But he would I always, you know, the last week or so after we lost John, I started thinking about, I think if I would ask John to describe Steve, your brother, after he described me, I'd feel better about myself. Because he would find things in me that maybe I didn't know, or that I didn't think anybody else noticed. And John was just so good at doing those kind of things. He would tell me about people he worked with, people here in California, friends, and I can't think of one person that when we were done with the conversation, I didn't say, God, I really want to meet this person. I want to go, you know, have a drink with this person. I want to go out for dinner for this person because he sounds like a wonderful person. And I think that was just one part of John's ability. It's just, you know, finding such great things in all the people he met. On one of my trips here, we were driving down the road, and I was actually on a project out in New York, and there was a gentleman on the side of the road, like when we were getting off the expressway, that was, you know, had a sign saying they need $1 for food or whatever. And you know, I'm not. If any of you people are from out east, I'm not saying that you're bad or anything, but the people out east have a little different attitude about some of the people that are begging for money. They think, you know, you shouldn't give them money. But we pulled off to the side, and I'll never forget John pulling out $1 and giving it to him. And I started talking about some of the conversations I had with some of the people out east and how you should, you know, never do it for this people who are just going to go spend it on booze or whatever. And I remember John telling me, you know, it might not help this person, it might not change his life, but $1 just might help the guy. And you know what? It makes me feel better when I give him $1. So that's why I do it, just because it makes me feel better. But I think John even found something nice in that poor guy on the side of the road that needed $1, whatever he needed $1 for. A couple stories that I just have to share with you. When we were young, we went to Canada fishing with my father. And I'll never forget, there was one instant when me and my brother were in the boat with my dad. And I can't remember, one of us caught a fish. And then my dad kind of got up to get the net or whatever. And as he put his pole down, a fish hit on his pole. So it was one of us and my father had a fish. And like a moment later, the third person had a fish. So we were in the boat at the same time. My dad had a fish, I had a fish, my brother had a fish. And we're all reeling them in at the same time. And we get them all in and everything. And I'll never forget, this is like 8th grade, don't forget. So, we're sitting there, and my dad starts crying, I guess because he's excited, because he caught a fish in the same boat with his 2 sons. And we're in 8th grade, so, we don't know why is Dad crying. And, one of us said, why is Dad crying? And my dad didn't say anything, and I remember Johnny kind of just leaning over saying, his was the smallest. And that's so Johnny. One of the last things we did is before he moved to California, he said he was a Cubs fan. I hope he died a Cubs fan. But he said he wanted to go to one more Cubs game before he moved to California because he wasn't sure, how many times he'd have an opportunity to do that. And I'll never forget, it was during the summer, and I had a job, between school or whatever, and I was working midnights, and I had been to sleep for 2 hours, and I still remember him waking me up and saying, I got like a week left, we're going to a Cubs game. Don't worry, we'll stop for coffee. And we picked up a couple friends. I can't really remember who the people are, but one of the biggest thrills if you're a baseball fan is catching a fall ball, you know what I'm trying to say? And I'll never forget, it was the San Diego Padres and the Chicago Cubs. And I can't remember, is it Dave or Paul Winfield, the great outfielder of the Padres, hit a foul ball. And we had nice seats. And it was one of these, it wasn't like a line drive or a pop-up, kind of one of these ones that kind of hopped around, and a few people fought over it and kept jumping. And I'll never forget the moment that we both put our hands up. I had my hands like this way, and John had his hands this way, and the ball just dropped right in our hands. And we're just standing there staring at each other, and we have all 4 hands on that ball. And the first reaction I think both of us had is just to rip the ball out of each other's hands. And we just kind of let go. I think he let go, and I took the ball back, and we just kind of looked at each other, just gave each other like the biggest high five you could ever think of. And I think of that maybe like one of his last moments before he made his life change out here. But it's an instant that I'll always remember, and it's something we talked about over the years. We would always say, do you remember the time he caught the foul ball? I think he might have had it actually. And lastly, I have to say, is every conversation I ever had with the guy on the phone, he always ended it with, I love you, brother. And I'll never forget that. There was a challenge when I was younger. I think any teenager, one of the things they want to do is be as independent as possible. And when I was in high school, it kind of bothered me when people told me, you look just like your brother, because I wanted to be my own person. But I just want to say, as the years went by, I don't think anything made me prouder. And people would ask me, about my family, and I would say I got a brother, he's my twin. I just would love talking about it. I would love talking about John, and I don't think I was as proud of being a twin as the person that was my brother who happened to be a twin. And that's the kind of person John was. When I was trying to put up what I was going to say here, I kind of gave up real quick when I said I have to sum up my brother's life kind of in 10 minutes. And real quick, after about the second legal pad, I decided you're just not going to do it. But I said, well, and I started thinking, I don't know why I would take it to the next level. I said, if I can't sum it up in 10 minutes, maybe I could try to sum it up in one sentence. And what I came up with is, if I was going to make a plaque for John, and I'm sure I'm missing something here, but I'm going to say it anyway, but I would say, John, he lived, passionate, without judgment, with understanding and patience, with everyone he met, and a whole lot of love. In closing here, I kind of found a poem the other day called Kin by Carl Sandburg. And I look at it as the person reading the poem is kind of in heaven looking down at us. And the poem goes like this. I'm singing this as my brother John may be saying it to me. And it's, brother, I am fire. surging under the ocean floor. I shall never meet you, brother, not for years anyhow, maybe thousands of years, brother. Then I will warm you, hold you close, wrap you up in circles, use you and change you, maybe thousands of years, brother. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. At this time, I'd like to ask if Colleen, John's sister-in-law, if she could come up and share a few things.
I'm John's sister-in-law, Colleen. However, I prefer to keep out the in-law. He truly felt like a brother to me, a brother I never had. He was so extremely special to me. I'm sure so many of you can relate to that. The thing I treasure the most is what he did for my sister Karen. He made her happier than she could ever imagine. I remember when she was a single mother with Rachel and Anthony. John had never been a husband before, let alone a father. He stepped up to the plate perfectly. Anthony adored him. Rachel had a father who truly knew the meaning of a father. He was my son Brandon's godfather. Brandon was crushed, like all of us, when he found out his uncle had gone to be with God. Tiffany and I took Brandon out of the house for a quiet moment to calm him. We talked about all the great times. Brandon remembered his hugs. He had the best hugs. His smile. We all remember his smile. He beamed with happiness. A gathering was not complete without John there. The past few days have given me a lot of time to look upon my own life. It has been such a wake-up call for me. Please, all of you, spread the word as I have and as Karen has expressed to me with tears. In remembrance of John, I've shared with many the passing of John and the heartfelt pain I feel for Karen. We all take every day for granted. Yesterday is a memory, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift, which is why it is called the present. Today is a gift, tomorrow is not a guarantee. We never know the moment our loved one will be taken from us. Please everyone say, I love you one more time. Hug your loved one like there may be no tomorrow, and always tell your loved one truly, truly how much you love them and all they do for you, the happiness they have brought to our life. Thank God, because God is so good. He gave that to Karen. When John had his heart attack a year ago, Karen was given the chance to have a deep, heartfelt talks with John. John also the same. They were able to express to each other how much they loved one another. He was able to and did express to Karen how deeply he loved her. Not all of us get that chance. However, talking to Karen, it still was not enough for her. She wanted to give him more. I know she told me he was her soulmate and best friend. What a blessing. However, we can look back over and over and say why. God had a different plan. He took a very special angel home to be with him. So on behalf of my beautiful sister Karen, I would like to dedicate this poem to her. I know these would be words she would speak to John. Today God called you home, extended his arms and opened heaven's door. I never knew emptiness, nor have I ever cried like this before. I know you're one of heaven's angels, and all I have to do is look above. You're in a happier place now. No pain, no sadness, just eternal love. You're no longer suffering. Your work on earth is done. God called you home, and your life in heaven has begun. But here on earth, there's a new star in the sky, shining with your spirit to keep your memory alive. You're one of heaven's angels now. You'll always be with me near or far. And when I need your guidance, I'll look upon to that shining star. In my heart, you'll always hold a special place that no one else could ever replace. If only I could have that shining star again to touch, just to let you know I love you so much. But I don't have to tell you, for you have always known that you'd be one of heaven's angels for when God calls me home. I believe that John would not want us to be sad for him. I believe he would want us to know that he was given us a great life. He brought so much happiness to all of our lives. His life had a purpose, unfortunately ended sooner than we wanted. Only God knows why. John never thought he would be a father nor a husband. That dream was fulfilled, and so many more. Let us all rejoice in the celebration of his life and remember him for who he truly was, a kind, gentle, easygoing, and very loving spirit.
First of all, I want to thank John's family, Karen in particular, for allowing me a chance to speak, even though I didn't know John that long. John hired me 3 years ago at Diebold Corporation, and as you know, John, he always had a way of making you feel good about things that might not necessarily be a good event or a good situation. And I remember during our interview, he, of course, asked that standard question, and what do you consider your greatest shortcoming? And I said, well, John, I'm a two-finger typist, and so I hope I don't have to deal with creating volumes of reports or email. And he said, oh, there's just a little email, but don't worry about it. And of course, the Diebold team knows how much humor there was in that statement. And John and I seem to strike a sense of kindred spirit about certain things. Both of us were big fans of The West Wing. And so he'd always call me, or I'd call him, and we'd talk about the previous week's episode and so forth. And he was really struck by the time Leo McGarity, one of the characters on the show, had a heart attack. And I just remember we had a long conversation about that and what ifs, and can you imagine the lead character like that going off the show? And those of you who know the show, in real life, John Spencer, the guy who played Leo McGarity, did die of a heart attack about a year later. And I was the person who saw that on CNN and actually called John. And I remember he was devastated that one of his favorite television personalities had succumbed in reality to something that happened on stage. But John was such an interesting person in that he had this tremendous sense of humor that you heard so much about, and I'm sure anyone who knew him experienced it at different times. And yet John was philosophical and thought deeply about a lot of things. And one thing that I think about in situations like this is, how can I make this event affect my life? And as you've heard by the folks who spoke before me, John made everyone's life a little better when he touched their life. And I think, for me personally, that's what I will try and do going forward, just because he did so much for so many people, and I never heard a negative word about John because everyone loved him. And I think that's why we're all here. The one other thing I'd like to do, and I won't be too long-winded about it, John, of course, I didn't realize John was a writer until today, but I knew he was a little bit philosophical. So I borrowed some quotes from a philosopher that I knew he admired. And some of you, I'm sure, will recognize it as soon as I do this little reading. So, and I did paraphrase a little bit, so bear with me as I go through it. And if the roles were reversed and John was here speaking about me, he might pick a quote like this one. And as you know, John did travel a lot. So you might picture him saying some of these things. Reading departure signs in some big airport reminds me of the places I've been. Visions of good times that brought so much pleasure makes me want to go back again. If it suddenly ended tomorrow, I somehow could adjust to the fall. Good times and riches, pardon this, and sons of bitches, I've seen more than I can recall. It's those changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes, nothing remains quite the same. Through all of the recaps and all of the go-backs, if we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane. And that was John. His sense of humor carried him through and so many things, and he radiated that to the rest of us. And those of you who know me know that it's kind of my method of coping as well. So thank you for your time.
I tried to write something
trying to reflect back on my dad. And it was hard. I didn't catch on to those traits that he had. But what sticks out the most is on June 27th, 1992, was the day that my parents were married. And on that day, I happened to be crying. I could not stop. The tears were running, my eyes were red, puffy, and everyone kept on coming up to me, "Are you sad because you're losing your mom?" And they weren't sad tears. I was so happy because I was gaining a dad and a family. Recently, last year, I graduated from college. He hadn't been prouder of me than anybody out there, any other parent. He was happier than I was. He was so excited. I was sitting waiting to go on stage and looked in the sea of faces to my left, and there he was in the middle with his camera waving at me. He was so happy. He's taught me a lot through my life. I definitely am the person I am today because of him. He was always teaching you about tolerance and to, love everybody, no matter how different they are, no matter who they may be, just, accept them for themselves. Recently, my last trip in May was the last time I saw him. We were planning my wedding, and I remember I was torn up going back home, and he sat there at the airport with me and told me, you're always going to be hurt when you leave, because that's your home, and it always will be. Talked about his home still being in Indiana. That was where, it felt like home, and it won't be the same now without him going back, but he definitely was my mom's soulmate. I definitely truly believe that, and I hope from their relationship I could carry that on to, my marriage and with my soulmate. On April 12, 1997, he wrote a poem for my mom. It's on the back of the programs. He entitled it The Awakened Heart. I closed my eyes but seldom slept. It was neither pain nor sorrow that kept me awake, not even sadness or the morning sun. It was the stillness of a restless heart. Its quiet struck me like a stormy day. The life it held was a burning lamp, but where it lived was a cave of stone. At first sight of her, the lamp grew brighter. It cracked the stone and lit the night. A door was opened, an angel smiled. The heart grew warm, the spirit rised. The walk had purpose, the life revived. And in her gentle calmness, in her higher place, she touched my soul and held my hand. She led me in and woke my heart. And now I sleep with dreams of light and live with peace and dance with life.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and everyone that has come up and shared. We can